modern API security and its authentication and authorization aspects. So over to you, Sanjeeva.
Okay, thank you, Sabri, and thank you, Siraz. Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to today's webinar on modern API security. So this webinar is part of webinar series organized by the Sluscom. And like he mentioned, my name is Sanjay Malagoda. I'm working as software architect at WSO2. So in my role, I'm primarily work with the API management and the API security side of our products, and overlooking into those security related aspect of the product. And also I'm working as a committee member of the SLASCOM. Uh, and without further discussing, let's move into today's agenda. Okay, this is our agenda for today. This webinar mainly focus on the modern API security. I know most of you are familiar with APIs and the usages of it, but just to recap what you already know, I'll quickly go through APIs and the API concept and the API management related some of these concepts that are important for today's session. And then we will discuss about standard API security related things, including authentication and authorization. Then on top of that, we will discuss about policy-based security. This policy-based security is split into two parts, static policies and dynamic policies. So we'll discuss about them as well. So then we will discuss about some of the vulnerabilities in APIs and how we can mitigate them using modern technologies. So under this, we will specifically discuss about OWASP top 10 security vulnerabilities and how we can mitigate some of them. So we will not have enough time to discuss all 10 security vulnerabilities. So we will discuss about the most common vulnerabilities and how we can mitigate them. So then there are some security problems that we cannot easily address with the traditional API security. So in that case, we will have to utilize artificial intelligence capabilities to address those. So we will discuss a little bit about that as well. And over last few years, there were a lot of API, not specific to related to API, but data protection laws were introduced. So if you are working with the European customers, most of you are familiar with the GDPR. So something similar to that, there's something called POPI, and likewise, almost all the territories have their own pace of data protection laws kind of things. So most of the time, people don't know we can address these data protection laws and regulations up to certain level using API security as well. So I'll discuss a little bit about that as well. Then we will have a quick summary on today complete session. Then we will go for Q&A session. So in this session, I will try my best to not to discuss about the specific product or the technologies. So rather, I will focus on the theories and the concepts behind this security measurement and the security best practices. So according to your deployment or your expertise, you can choose whatever the products to implement these things. So these concepts are not limited to any of the products available in today market. Okay. So first, let's have a look at what APIs and what API management is, because this kind of basic thing I know, but just to complete thing, I'll discuss about that as well. So if we go back to like 10, 15 years back, and at that time we had like applications and services. So those who were developing applications at that time, probably you may remember, we were developing Java applications, PHP services, that kind of different services using the framework. So most of the time, we deployed these things into Apache 2 IIS kind of servers, and then expose the services to outside. And when we implement the client, we consume these services. And when we implement these services, most of the time, security, access control, rate limit, and all these quality of services were inbuilt of these services. So as application developers or the service developers, rather focusing on the business logic, sometimes we have to work on the security and other quality of services as well. So we were not able to like just focus on our business logic and do it as freely. We have to take care about the security and all other things as well. So due to that problem, sometimes people started like moving this quality of services to separate layer from the services layer. So then we had something like this, and in here you can see we have APIs and integration layer, which is separate layer uh, built on between applications and the services. So in this layer, it took care about like security access control and quality of services that we discussed earlier. So with this, users were able to freely develop their services rather worrying about these complicated things. And also with this, there are like different companies started investing on their API and integration strategies. And some of the large organizations invested heavily to build certain products around these capabilities. So with that, Google, Apigee, Microsoft, and almost all the top vendors heavily invested in this API and integration domain. And all of them have their API management and integration product as of now, including the Amazon. So with this, this domain evolved further, and there were like a lot of new things came. And similarly, API security domain also evolved. So then let me go to some of the recent reports about the API, just to give you some understanding about how these APIs evolved. So in a recent report, it was mentioned that Stripe generate 100% of their revenue through API calls. Similarly, Expedia generate 90%, eBay 60%, Salesforce 50% likewise. So that means these large organizations generate considerable amount of their revenue through API calls. So it can be indirect revenue or direct revenue, that doesn't matter, but these people are connected to outside and do their business directly through the API. So with this, you can understand what is the importance of APIs in the today digital driven organizations. So next, let me go to another report that previous one we discussed about the revenue. So this is Akamai report. So Akamai is a world leading content delivery network. So due to the nature of their business, they know in and out about web services and how internet behaves. So in their 2019 report, they have mentioned that they found out 83% of the web traffic are specifically for the APIs. So that's kind of like a very different thing than what people think these days. So majority of the web traffic is now for APIs. So, and also they have mentioned that will be kind of a challenge for security practitioners, because we were so far like more focused on the application security and the desktop security and that kind of thing. Now it was revealed that 83% of the traffic is API traffic. So now we have to focus on API security very seriously. So then another report I would like to highlight. There are so many reports because I'm just pointing out these facts to just to give you some idea about the importance of having this API security. Okay, so Imperva is web application firewall development company. So they have done research for like 250 top level organizations. So while doing this analysis, they have found out 69% of these organizations have public and partner APIs that expose to outside. So that means 2/3 of these companies expose their services to outside as APIs. So then final thing is Gartner report. So I mean, this is not a magic. I mean, if you carefully analyze previous facts that we discussed, so we were discussed about like web traffic is 83% now API calls, And 2/3 of the companies have public or partner APIs. And one of the leading companies generate their revenue mainly through the APIs and things like that. So with the success of APIs, that also makes attractive target for the hackers as well. So now people know APIs evolve like very fast. We do most of the things through the APIs. People do money transferring through the APIs. People buy things through APIs. So then hackers also attracted to this API domain. So with that, Gartner predicts by 2022, API abuses will become most frequent attack vector in a web domain. So we are like, even now we are like seeing some of the signs of that. And within next few years, that will be real challenge for everyone in this domain. So now we will discuss about a little bit about API security impact. So we will discuss about the API security and why it is important, all these things. So now let's see what happens if there's some problem with our API security model or any API attack. So let's say if some kind of API attack happened to your organization and you have exposed to your services and you link with outside through the APIs, then definitely your operation level disruptions will happen. Because if your partners, your customers, your suppliers cannot access your services, that means it will have a direct impact on your revenue. And as a result, you will lose like significant market amount, and it will also have negative publicity on your business brand, kind of things also can happen. So when we have this kind of negative publicity, it can eventually lead to like revenue loss, and also long-term impact will be there. So if you analyze carefully previous data breaches and the API attacks happen in the previous past, in the past, like last 2-3 years. So whenever this kind of thing happen, usually their market share and the stock value, all these things will be dropped. So that will have a huge impact on your organization. And also there can be legal problems, because when you store someone else's data and that compromise, so those kind of things will lead to unpleasant legal problems as well. And other thing is the repetitive attacks. So once someone found out your APIs are vulnerable, they will not just stop by doing one attack, they will keep coming. That means they will do attacks again and again with almost all the APIs available in system. Because most of the time, if they find vulnerability in one API, most of the time, if we take entire organization, there is a high chance of possibility applying that vulnerability to other APIs as well. So they will not just stop by one API, they will go to other APIs as well. And if you have like your partners, suppliers, details stored in your system, and some hackers get access to those APIs, their data also can be stolen, and then their details also will be compromised. So these are some of the problems that we have. So this is a famous quote by Sun Tzu. He's a famous, he's a author of a famous book, Art of War. So he said, if you know about your enemy and yourself, you don't need to fear about results of 100 battles. So that simply says, if you know yourself and your enemy, you don't have to worry about winning. So that is like not just applicable to warriors or the war. So that is equally apply for the API security domain as well. Because when you define API security strategy for your organization, you should know your strengths and weaknesses. And similarly, you should know about your enemies as well. So in this particular case, enemy means API attackers. So you should have clear idea about them as well. Basically, you need to know what kind of tools they are using, what kind of methodologies they are following, what are their like strengths, what are their patterns, what are the top 10 attacks happened last 1 year or 2 year, and is my system secure for those things? So that kind of understanding we need to have. So it's not just like that our enemies, we should know about our system as well. So if we take this domain, then we need to know how many APIs we do have. So all those APIs are secure. Is there any abandoned APIs? So are they security strict enough? All this information we need to know. So they are like famous Facebook data breach happened like 2018. So in that case, that happens because they have like so they had some abandoned APIs, and through that people harvest data. So likewise, you need to know everything about your system to implement successful API security strategy. So when I start this session, I said we will discuss about OSAP, OSP, and common security vulnerabilities that they introduce. So Open Web Application Security Project, or OWASP, is leading web security related non-profitable project. So they work on improving and establishing security standards in the software industry. So they have identified top 10 security vulnerabilities. Understanding these non-attack types is kind of very important for anyone who truly care about API security. So these are like top 10 vulnerabilities they have identified last year. So when we go through slides, we will discuss about each of these in detail. And I don't think we will have enough time to discuss all of these. So I'll try to, I focus on like 3 or 4 most common attacks and discuss these things in detail. So before going to complicated security mechanism, we need to discuss about authentication and authorization, because everything happens on top of authentication and authorization. So authentication means primarily who you are. So when you make a API call to API server, you have to tell who you are. So in order to like do that, you can pass your user credentials. So that can be basic authentication, this authentication headers, or it can be auth2 access token, JSON web token. It can be certificate, biometrics, hardware or software token. So anything that proves you and anything that let system to identify you. So when this authentication happen, you pass user credential and server side it checks who you are. Then it authenticated you successfully and give you whatever results that you expect. So that is about authentication. So authorization is one layer up on top of authentication. So authorization needed whenever we need fine-grained or coarse-grained permission validation on top of the authentication. So when we discuss about authorization, SACML is a famous policy language that allows us to define different authorization policies. And similar to that, in the OAuth2, we have a concept called scope. So we can utilize that to manage the authorization. And it can be like open policy agent. And it's very important to have like authorization for the APIs, especially because APIs have multiple resources that need a different level of access. So this is how authorization works. So when you identify yourself, you prove your identity, then check what you can really do. So in the previous case, who you are. Now we are asking what you can do. What are the permissions that you have? What are the eligible operations for your logged in session? So that kind of thing is the authorization means. So authorization check result can be a set of operations or set of scopes, or it can be access control list kind of thing. So that's about the authorization. So authentication and authorization are must-have parts in any of the system, especially when it comes to API security. So then on top of authentication and authorization, we have like a rule and policy-based security mechanisms. So that is specifically applicable to API security. So rule and policy-based security checks can be performed in static or dynamic manner. So later we will see what is the difference between these two. And these rule and policy-based security mechanisms also must have capabilities for any of the API management solution or any of the API security solution that we have today. So we will see static policies. So static policy means we do a security check against certain requests or certain API calls, and that does not depend on the request volume on the previous request data. So it's just a static policy, and each and every request that are coming to server will analyze against this static policy. So let me give you some example. So one common example is payload scan against various attacks. So there can be cohesive parsing attacks, entity expansion, schema poisoning, that kind of attacks. So basically when you send the request, we just take the request and do the validation and see whether this have some kind of a harmful message kind of thing. So that is one example. Other example is checking a payload and the header for the SQL or the generally injections. So injections mean you inject some malicious content into this header or payload and let it execute in the server side. And also these static policies can be used to validate request scheme. So if you have like predefined scheme and incoming request does not comply with that, then we can block that as well. So now let's have a practical example. So I said we will discuss about OS top 10 security vulnerabilities and take them as example. So in this case, I will consider lack of resource and rate limiting case as example. So let's see how this. So now we have API, which is employee information API, and we have hacker. His name is John. So now John is sending large message payload. So with this, so this is like, so in the previous case, if you remember, this one I said like there are like different pass attacks, right? So with this kind of message, when we send it to server side, first it hit to parser, and parser try to pass this message. So then in that case, there can be problem. So server resources can be exhausted by like sending this kind of large payload. So while servers processing these messages, it start consuming a lot of resources, and sometimes that can lead to server crash as well. So this example shows previously discussed attack name XML bomb. So that's fallen under pass attacks. So when servers start reading, it consumes a large amount of memory and limit the resources for other operations. So that is XML bomb kind of thing is one example. And also similar to this one, John can also send some message with large number of entities. So let's say we have like nested elements, and then one element can refer to another one, that refer to another one. So likewise, it can grow up to like hundreds of thousands of elements. So those attacks called entity expansion attacks. So this is XML bomb. So that kind of attacks users can easily do. So you can see now, even if you have authentication and authorization, you can easily do this kind of attacks using API. So it's not like something hard or something like you should struggle. These attacks are very easy. I mean, so then in order to mitigate these attacks, let's see what we can do. So in this case, we have like API gateway. So in the API gateway level, we do specific security check just to see the entity expansion and the XML bomb kind of thing. Then we can reject this particular request saying, okay, you have too many requests, too many content with this message kind of thing. So if you are like familiar with API gateways, so most of the API gateways does support that as well. And also if you are like implement plain service logic, then when you initiate the parser, you can pass some parser attributes. So when you initiate parser, you can set certain limits, entity expansion limit, total length kind of thing, all these things you can limit. So by take care about those things, you can mitigate this attack as well. So when you see this attack, you may think like this is okay, this is a very, very simple attack. Who develop systems to like vulnerable for this kind of attacks. So those who are familiar with the Kubernetes, when you use the kubectl command, you can pass config maps to the Kubernetes server side, right? So when you pass these config maps, so those config maps are usually like YAML kind of files or the content that you can pass to Kubernetes server. So in 2019 September, as I remember, next slide, we will have that 2019 September, there was this issue reported. So when you pass the config maps, you can do the pass attacks. So with that, so they identified that immediately and later they fixed it. So if you go to this link, you can see all the details about that issue. So, so when we discuss about these security vulnerabilities, I will discuss about some of the samples and some of the company names, not to insult them or not to tell their security is kind of low, but I just wanted to highlight you. So even big companies, even leading companies, leading IT companies will do this kind of mistakes time to time. So that is all what I need to highlight. So even Kubernetes, we had this vulnerability like a few months back. So that is the message I need to give you all. So to avoid the pass attacks, so these are the things that you can do. So you can limit or don't allow DTDs, and you can limit entity expansion. You can resolve externals. And like I mentioned earlier, you can limit the parser depth and total input size. And you can use some of the like reputed parsers when you do certain operations. And when you have like XSLTs kind of thing, you can limit that as well. So when you read these things, you will feel like it's more like XML. This concept not only applicable for XML, it will equally applicable for JSON as well. So that's about pass attacks. So now I'll discuss about injection attacks. So I'm sure most of you have seen this image, right? So this person keep trying to do drop the database in the automatic find calculation system. So we really don't know this particular person succeed or not, but according to our knowledge, like if they haven't take the proper security precautions, this will work sometimes. So we don't know, we cannot tell it really, but there's a possibility of attacking this kind of systems. So let's see some of the practical example. So in the OWASP top 10 security vulnerabilities, they have a specific thing related to injection. So we will take one example and discuss about that. So then in this case also we have API and we have a database layer. In the API, what we do is that we will call to database and retrieve some information related to account and pass it to client. So now we have our hacker John. So he keep accessing his account details with his user ID 1002. Now it will generate DAO layer, data access object layer, some query like this: select asterisk from account where first ID is 1002. Then he will get the response. Okay. So now next time, now he knows he will get the response. So he think now, okay, so I passed the ID. So this particular ID must be executed against database as a database query. And he tried to do the SQL injection kind of thing. So now with his query parameter, instead of ID equals ID value, he passed some other characters. So he put O condition and 1 equals 1 kind of thing. So then it will generate SQL query like this. So that means in this SQL query, in the end, they have like O condition. In the O condition, one right side is always true because 1 equals 1 is anyway true. So that will applicable for almost all the record entries in this table. So as a result, this particular person can read almost all the records in the database or data table. So this is kind of a vulnerability that available in some of the systems. So in order to prevent this, what we can do is we can have a API security gateway. So when I say API security gateway, it is not necessary to have a dedicated gateway. If need, you can embed this logic to service itself as well. So I'm just, for the simplicity, I'm taking that logic to outside and point that as a API gateway. So now he send the exact same request, but now in this case, API gateway will have injection detection logics. So that can be like a regex kind of thing, or else it can look for the input validation, or it can look for the search and certain keywords like O, select, drop, database, that kind of word. So that kind of logic is embedded in the API gateway. So now when it comes with this kind of request, it will validate the ID query parameter. Now no, this is kind of a SQL injection, and it returns saying, okay, you are trying to do the SQL injection. No, we can't accept this request. So now this particular request will be blocked. Okay, so so that's about static policy checks. So now we will go for look at dynamic policy checks. Let me give one example for the SQL injection kind of attacks. So if you are familiar with, if you have heard about like Samsung device cloud, so in 2018 or 2017, there was a vulnerability like this. So with that, when you log in or when you query about your devices, you can pass this kind of argument. So with that, some users were able to, delete some of the devices, some of the cameras, and some of the data. So later they found it and they fixed it. So that is why I keep telling, like, so even big organizations can do this kind of small mistakes. So now we'll discuss about the dynamic policies. So unlike static policies, in this case, request checking and the validation logic varies how system behaves. So basically, this particular dynamic policy is applicable for a specific time window or a specific data volume or a specific batch of request. So unlike static policies, these results can be vary time to time. So in the static case, if you pass that same message to system 100 times, you will get the same result. So in that case, that's not the case. Result always depend on the previous data volume and the time of the request you are sending. So likewise, different parameters associated with that. So let's see how we can take example and discuss. So in this case also, I will take sample for lack of resource and rate limiting. So in this case, we have like API, employee information API. Then we have our hacker John. So now we try to send certain request. So you can send any number of requests. So after certain threshold received, this employee information service can be stopped. So allowing users to access APIs without a way of controlling can lead to overwhelmed system. And this type of sudden burst of request also identified as a denial of service attack. So usually we identify them as a denial of service attack. So they are like smart ways of doing the distributed DDoS attack kind of thing. So in generally, these things identify as a DDoS attack. To prevent this sort of attacks, authentication and authorization will not just helpful. So probably you have seen this. So most of these attacks cannot easily detect with just with the authentication and authorization, because you need some additional layers of security, additional things to detect these kind of attacks. So if we enable the rate limit, then we can avoid excessive attack. So in this case also, we have service. Now we have API gateway. So as you can see here, when we define the rate limit policies, we can say, okay, allow only 3 requests at any given time. So that kind of logic can be implemented. So once that happens, it will accept only 3 calls. From the 4th call onward, it will respond back to John saying, okay, you have sent too many requests. We cannot accept that anymore. So when we define this kind of throttling and the access limit policies, you can use IP address, access token, or the user to limit the request. So in that case, if it is a user, then it keep counting requests for a specific user. And if that exceed the given threshold limit, then it will block the request. So that is how it works. Okay, so then we discuss about two different attacks and under the OSP. So now we will discuss about the broken object level authorization. I am discussing this one specifically because with the API design best practices itself, you can mitigate certain attacks. So this will be a very good example for like API design best practices. So let me explain the attack first. So we have API, and when you call this API, you need to call with a specific ID. Then we have our attacker John. So he keeps sending request. He call person with his ID. So now he get the response. Then he think, okay, my number is 1002, but if I try with some other number, so then it goes to backend. And if backend does not have any permission, then what it does is it will return that person's detail. So ideally, we should have some kind of authorization whether this actually user who is calling this service is 101001 ID. So when you look at this attack, you will see this is like a very primary kind of attack. But unfortunately, this attack also happened one of the world largest telco provider. I will discuss about that later. So in this case, in order to mitigate this, what we'll do is that we can ask user to send access token. So instead of like accepting ID from the user, we allow users to pass access token and let him to call me endpoint, right? So rather relying on user provided IDs, what we do is that we will derive user ID with the access token. So when we get access token to a gateway, we will anyway do the introspection call, which is to like, we usually do to validate access token. So along with that, we can get some of the user attributes as well. So in this case, we get the access token. With the access token, we call to our internal system and get user ID. So then that particular user ID will be passed to API level. So then with that, we no longer trust user provided IDs. Instead of that, what we do is that we will derive user ID based on the user provided authentication information. So now he cannot send any other's ID. He can only send his token. So based on that token, he will get the desired response. So I mentioned this is like a very basic attack. So in 2017, there was an attack happened in the T-System, T-Mobiles. So in their case, what this attack look like is, so they have user portal kind of thing. So when you invoke that user portal APIs, you can pass the mobile number and retrieve the information. So for example, if I know someone else's mobile number, then I can call the service and get almost all the details that they have in their system. So you can understand the level of vulnerability. So this is like a multi-billion company and very famous company. But that kind of attack was there. That's happened in 2017. And at that time, nobody cares about the API security anyway. So that could be the reason for that. But if you have like someone else's number, then you can get almost all the details about them. So that was kind of a very famous attack, and that created a very negative image about their services and their security. Okay. So so far we were discuss about most of the basic security rings. So we discussed about the authentication, authorization, and some of the policy-based things. So then we will see some things we cannot do with the we cannot easily do with the policy-based and authentication and authorization, right? So with all these things, we still have certain challenges, right? So let's say we have like a policy for these APIs, and what if we have very high number of sessions across many APIs? So let me give you one example. Let's say we have like a shopping cart application, right? So in order to buy something, you will do at least 50 to 100 API calls to your shopping cart APIs. So that means you search certain things. So you search about that product, you read the reviews, you read the documentation. So then you compare these things, and eventually you will select a product, and you will add it to your cart, then you will buy it, then you will do the payment. So if you see number of API calls you made in this case, so in order to search and read the reviews, you may like invoke like 50 API calls, right? So then when you buy this thing, you can do like one API call, and when you pay, you need to do like 2 3 another API calls, like including the redirection here and there. So likewise, you will do lot of API calls just to do a very simple thing. So as you can see here, we have high number of sessions across many APIs just to do single thing. So it's very hard to, detect these things and correlate these things and come up with the unique policy for each and every attack, right? Similar to that, uh, if you take previous example again, you can understand like search API you call 50 times, right? So buying API you call one time, payment API you call one time. So likewise, based on the API, their access patterns are different. So in the search API, calling 100 times a day can be normal. But when it comes to buying API, if user trying to do it 100 times per day, that's kind of abnormal, right? Because you don't go to eBay and buy 100 times in a day, right? You don't do payment in 100 times a day. So likewise, each API has a different access pattern. So it's very hard to, have a generic kind of policies for all the APIs. And also, like I mentioned earlier, just to buy one thing, we do like 50 to 100 API calls. So imagine larger retail or the large e-commerce platform, how many API calls happen per day. So if we are to analyze all of them for the security vulnerabilities, it would be kind of a nightmare. And also like you have different devices, different clients, different mobile applications. So you search from your laptop, and then you buy from your mobile device. So likewise, these kind of things also can happen. And also sometimes these hackers and attackers, both of them reside within the genuine legitimate users and do these kind of attacks. So that is also challenge. They also have access token. And also another challenge we are seeing is like lack of awareness. So most of the time, if you take today industries, IT security department, so they are like more focused on the server level access, server hardening, all these things. So think about that carefully. So yeah, think about your organization. Uh, do you have like specific security persons who look into API security? So most of the time, answer is no, because people are like not aware about these APIs. So even security practitioners do not much focus on the APIs and the API security. And that is also another problem, because challenge is, so each API has its own access pattern and its own way of like doing attacks. So they cannot like handle them manually. So I discuss about these challenges because so people are trying to mitigate these challenges through the artificial intelligence. So now let's see how artificial intelligence can do this thing. Okay, so to fill the cracks left by the traditional security, we can use the artificial intelligence. So that means if we go back to previous sample, let's say we have like 100 APIs, and each of these 100 API have their own access pattern. One person cannot detect all these 100 patterns and define policies for them. But machines can do that, because machines can build a specific model for each and every API and define the boundaries and identify the outliers. So if you are familiar with some of the AI related concept, probably you know about k-means kind of thing. So with the k-means kind of algorithms, you can provide a set of data, and you can build cluster boundaries kind of thing. Then whenever new request comes, you can put that data point into your cluster and see whether it's outlier or not. So if it's outlier, most probably it can be attacked. So likewise, so even we cannot write rule per API basis, AI can build models per API basis. So there are like solutions available today market that do this part as well. So they will build a model per API basis, per user basis. For each and every user, also they build the model. So for example, if I consider myself and I'm a user, so I can log into Facebook like 5 times a day, right? But there can be another person who use the 6 times a day, that kind of thing. So that AI-driven anomaly detection systems can build specific access-related models for each and every user and identify their patterns uniquely and prevent them. So when this security model evolve, I think most of the time traditional security measurements will no longer needed, and that AI-based security layer will be able to address most of the today critical security vulnerabilities. So we'll have a look at on example as well. So let's say, so in this case, we have like API gateway and we have service like previous. So now we have Mary and also we have John. So Mary is from United States and she's having a specific IP address. So she keep using the system. So she send her authentication ID and do certain operations and it gets succeeded. So based on the Mary's previous behavior, this AI-driven anomaly detection system has built some of the knowledge base. So basically, that identified Mary's access patterns, Mary use devices, all these things, it can identify, it can record them uniquely. And basically, it has built a specific model for Mary. So it works for Mary. So now let's assume John somehow stolen Mary's token. So now he is trying to invoke the same API with Mary's token, right? But in this case, when these two requests come to gateway check them with the anomaly detection system. So anomaly detection system knows Mary's behavior. So it knows Mary's IP address, Mary's user agent, Mary's cookies, all these things know. And it also knows how many times Mary access per minute, how many times Mary access per hour, that kind of things also it knows. So it's unlike human, it can like identify almost all the patterns and keep them. So when these two requests come, it goes to anomaly detection layer and then see, okay, Mary's IP is correct. So that is United States IP, and probably Mary's session cookie also recorded and identified, and access frequencies kind of align with what Mary's normal access pattern. So now it identified Mary as a legitimate user. So similarly, when John's request analyze, okay, access token that is belong to Mary. So then it validates IP address, session cookies, devices, access time, all other complicated things with the Mary's model, which is specifically designed for the Mary. So then it can easily detect this thing. This is not Mary because like within 5 minutes, Mary access the same service from the United States. Then how Mary can access the same thing again from the Argentina? So there's no possibility, right? I mean, she cannot travel that fast. So then it will identify that as a vulnerability and it will send 200 to Mary and it will send error response to John. So likewise, it can detect these things. So this is a very basic example. So these AI models kind of bit complicated and you need to read through a little bit to just to understand them. So I tried my level best to simplify this thing and help you to understand. So this is how AI works. So with that I covered AI involvement of API security as well. So now I will discuss a little bit about the data protection laws and the API security. So if you are working with the European or the South African clients, So you know about these things. So they have like data protection regulations. So they have something called personally identifiable information. So when you store personally identifiable information, there are certain security policies apply to you. So storage limitations, integrity and confidentiality, accountability, lawful and fairness, purpose of limitation, minimalization, accuracy, right to be forgotten. So all these rules will be applicable to personally identifiable data. So now let's see how these and API security can be interrelated. So, so API gateways usually position to address these data protection regulations as well. So API gateways usually reside outside the network. I mean, that can act as like entry point for your APIs. Then when you consider about the previous scenarios like data minimalization, purpose of limitation kind of thing, you can easily address them with the API security as well, because you can limit the access to your data using the scopes. So with the previously I discussed about the fine-grained permission validation. So with that kind of thing, you can specifically control access to your data. So that's my point. I mean, when you implement this data protection regulation, so you can do same with the API security. And also they said like accountability. I mean, we have to trace all the incoming and outgoing messages, what happened, when happened, all these things need to be recorded. So that is also part of the API security. And if you go to OWASP top 10 security vulnerabilities, they specifically highlighted requirement of logging all the events. So if you are logging all these events, then you are fulfilling some of the requirement of GDPR as well. So similar to that, there are like a lot of things we can do. So this session, I think today time is not enough to discuss all these things. So the idea is like when you try to build a system which is compliant with the GDPR or any other personal identifiable information related data protection laws, just think about doing that in the API layer itself. Because most of the people try to modify their existing services and do certain changes and fix it then and there, right? But you can clearly define the boundaries at the API gateway level and do the API security thing right and address most of these concerns. So with that, service developers can freely focus on their service development while you take care about all these data protection laws and other things. Okay, I think with that, I covered everything what I wanted to discuss today. So now I think we can go for a Q&A session.
All right. Thanks a lot, Sanjeev. That was quite interesting, especially the data protection one. I hope we get some time for a session with regards to data protection and API security. That being said, I have a couple of questions that have come in already. So the first question, I'll just go in the order. First question asked by one of our attendees is, what are some of the tools that we can use to scan API vulnerabilities?
Yeah, so there are like, so like initially I mentioned, I'm not going to tell about these tool names because I am also work for one of these organization which deals with the API security. And so I don't think it's right to, mention the names, but I'll just say, so there are like a lot of tools available. So API security scanning, you can start from the API definition itself. So when you define API from the Swagger or Open API definition, so there are like tools available. So if you go to apisecurity.io, you can just provide your API and see the vulnerabilities. So before you implement anything, when you have contract itself, you can start analyzing this API. So then they will do certain checks and say, okay, this particular API is HTTP enabled, so that's a kind of vulnerability. And this has like a lot of resources. Some of these resources do not have fine-grained access control, not associated with scopes and things like that. So likewise, you can start from the design level. So once you start with the design level, you can go to development level. So then once you develop the service, then again you can do testing. So there are also like client tools that helps to detect these things. So likewise, once you put that into the deployment also, you can do certain things. You can do like so SQL injection kind of thing. You can like easily do, like there are like a lot of tools available. So some of these things you can do manually, and also you can do using tools. So I'm not going to mention specific names because I don't feel it's right, but you can easily find them.
All right. Next, we have another question with regards to products again, but this is with regards to AI powered, like the ones that you were explaining about in your presentation. Maybe we don't cover any specific tools that are out there in the market, but are there any tools that make use of and leverage API security with AI, Sanjay?
Yes, yes. So, so AI-based security and the API security, a lot of tools available. So I can just give you like names if you need. So the one is Ping Intelligence. So they do this quite well. And also there are like other companies. So I cannot recall. Okay. So the Ping Intelligence is the most famous one in this domain. And also there are like some people build using like the Google has like TensorFlow. Some people use the TensorFlow, and on top of that they have built certain things, certain policies kind of thing. And likewise there are like tools implemented. So if you're like looking for the inbuilt solution, there are like a lot of inbuilt solutions available. But these things you can easily build. I mean, you if you like quite familiar with Python, then you can easily take certain Python libraries, and you can build this by yourself.
That's nice. Okay. So in terms of the AI powered security features, you explained one use case, Sanjeev. Are there any other use cases in terms of security that AI
Uh,
has been applied?
Yes. So I was mainly discussing about like how we can detect different users,
Mm,
and also we can identify one other case like access frequencies. For
mhm,
example, let's say you have like your bank account, right? So you have bank account and you do certain transactions, right? So for example, let's say you have configured your POS device with the bank account, and normally you get like 100 customers per day, and your customers pay the money and it goes to bank, and in the end of the day you will withdraw that money. So that is your normal access pattern, right? So that is one access pattern. So if we take another access pattern, uh, there can be one person who deposit just one times a day, and who that person also withdraw that one times a day. So now when we have this API AI driven anomaly detection system kind of thing, that will build different model for these two personas, right?
mm,
So when let's say in the first shop case, so they like do 100 transactions, but they withdraw time to time. I mean, morning they withdraw, lunchtime they withdraw. So likewise 4 5 withdrawals happen. Then this system can easily detect, okay, there can be some kind of incident happen. So this can be like some person like compromise security, and maybe that person is stealing money. So likewise, it can identify the different behaviors of the users, and identify these things. And also it's not just limited to that DOS attack. So there are like in the DOS, there's like specific distributed DDoS attacks. So these are like kind of very smart attacks. Sometimes there can be like target DDoS attack. So target DDoS attacks mean they are not blindly send specific request to server. So let's say you have search API, buying API, and payment API, right?
mm,
So in this case, you can specifically target payment API within a limit. Like you do like one rupee, 2 rupee payment, you keep doing, right? So with that, you put a specific load to payment API. With that, other users cannot do large transactions, right? I think you can easily understand that. So with that, payment API keep busy, but it does not exceed the threshold. Like it keep the busy the system. Others cannot do the transaction. So this is like a target DDoS attack. So these kind of things humans cannot detect like easily. So if we have like AI kind of thing, they can easily detect this kind of thing and report it. Okay, someone trying to keep the system busy with the low amount transactions, and some people are trying to do the large transactions, but they cannot do it and fail it. Kind of thing can be notified. So these are some of the practical usages of API-driven security.
Now, when it comes to this whole AI powered decision making in order to allow access to the APIs, of course, like you mentioned, those scenarios are there, but that scenario, some of the scenarios could be just a deviation from the user's normal pattern as well, right?
Yes.
So in that case, do we have some sort of control where, okay, we can allow a little bit of a threshold of error there? Or for example, if the AI detects that this user is doing some uncharacteristic flow, it will deny access? Or is there some sort of configuration that we can do also for
So
that?
most of the time in the banking domain, what they'll do is that they will like stop and the notify. So they
Right.
will stop the transaction immediately, then they will notify saying authorities and the relevant account owner saying, okay, this kind of abnormal activities we are seeing, just have a look at and let us know if this is a normal behavior, then we are good to go kind of thing, right? So that is for the financial domain. But if we take like other domains, like other domains that use the API, AI-driven API security, that can be just like the notification. So system admins will notify, so it won't stop the call. So it will just inform the system administrator, okay, this kind of IP is like sending too many requests. You decide what to do, that kind of thing. So both of that happen. So sometimes it just notifies, sometimes it blocks and notifies. Both will happen based on the use case.
That's right. Okay. So depending on the industry and whatever domain that you're in, you
Yes,
can leverage it to whatever you want to.
yes, exactly.
Okay, fine. So then we have three more questions as well. So guys, keep asking your questions. We'll see how much we can go for as well. Here we have another question, which is a bit of a basic question, asking to explain the difference between JWT and access tokens. I'm not exactly sure what this is referring to, but maybe Sanjeev, if you can just give a
Yeah,
brief on what JWT is and so on.
yeah. So JWT means JSON Web Token. So most of the time, JSON Web Tokens will have like, so if you take the JSON Web Token specification, that can have three parts, basically token header, token body, and the sign body. So just by looking at the JWT token itself, we can most of the time we can determine most of the details about this token, basically who is the token issuer, what is the JWK's endpoint that I need to use to validate the signature. So all these informations are inbuilt itself, right? So that's the importance of JW. So it's quite lengthy, and it has a signature itself. So systems can validate it without connecting to external system. But unlike that, OPEC tokens and other normal tokens are usually UUIDs. I mean, it can be like the 2-digit unique identifier that doesn't have a specific meaning. So that means you cannot just by looking at that identifier, you cannot tell this user is legitimate or not or whatever thing. So in that case, what you have to do is that you have to call secure token service, formerly known as STS, and pass that token and get the information. So that is the main difference between OPEC token and then JWT tokens.
Then Sanjeev, you mentioned a little bit about GDPR as well. So we have one of the individuals listening in. He was asking to explain how it works in if you're a freelancer, and are you going to be coping with GDPR and information security. Now, the whole idea behind a freelance is to finish it by a deadline, and they have limited resources as well. So this individual wants to just know your opinion, and if you have any advices in this area for a freelancer with dealing with GDPR related stuff.
Okay. So, so GDPR is GDPR applicable if you are storing some person who reside in the European region, right? So this act is now effected. So as I remember, it effected from the 2018 May 29th. Now it's in action, right? So that means if you violate that, so there are like fining mechanism either you have to pay 2 million euros or 4% of your annual turnover. I'm not 100% sure. I'm just telling this in with my memory. So this can that's kind of a law. So even if you are freelancer or like if you are working on the part of the project, so most of the time this particular solution will be deployed by someone else, right? So in their data centers they will deploy. So then GDPR has like two parties, controllers and processors. So most of the time when we develop the software, we become a data processor, right? So processors and controllers are equally responsible for data breaches and all these things. So if you are like a freelancing developer, most of the time, if you are develop the part of the solution, then you don't have to worry about that, because when you part into solution, most probably they will take care about that part. But if you are developing the complete solution, then it would be great if you focus on these things. So because there are like things like data anomaly, like right to be forgotten. So if you like implement the user portal kind of thing, you need to implement right to be forgotten. And data normalization is very important thing. For example, if you are developing the component and you log user details, I mean user ID kind of thing along with your log lines, then that should be deletable when user decide to uh, delete it, right? So then you have to focus on those sites as well. So likewise, there are like different many different regulation, I mean many different acts inside that regulation. So you have to focus on that. So that depends on the thing you do. So for example, if you're writing log, then you can anomalize the user ID and write it to log, right? So then if you like have user management system, it's better to have self delete capability, user info API kind of thing, just to retrieve what I stored in this system. So that kind of things you can implement. So based on the implement your solution, that varies, but I think you will have to do that as well.
Yeah, that's actually a very good answer with regards to that. And actually, since my company, we work a lot with the GDPR related things. I think a part of uh, the the ownership of this whole GDPR thing should come in from the client as well. Of course, you having a working knowledge of this GDPR practices and all would be good, but in terms of driving force, ideally you should expect it from them. If you do not, I think you should speak up and talk to them as well and get their stance on it, because there are some companies that have certain exceptions to the GDPR processes as well, which they have signed with their customers also. So my perspective here as well, it's a good idea to have a working knowledge of it, but it's great that you communicate it in advance as well, in terms of whatever features, like for example, the whole right to be forgotten aspect and so on.
Yes, exactly. So you can discuss with the client and see, I mean, if they're like building complete solution out of this, and this part is not directly deal with the personally identifiable information, you don't have to worry about that at all. I mean, that's not applicable to other data. So this GDPR is specifically apply for the personally identifiable information only. So other information like not relevant to personal detail can be used as is. I mean, it's better to always talk to them and see what are the real requirements are.
All right, so we have two more questions coming in, Sanjeev, your way. So first of those two questions is, what's your view on put and delete methods on APIs? Modern web application firewalls are blocking them.
Okay. Yes. So some of the modern web applications firewalls are blocking them, but if you like go to the HTTP specification and register maturity model even, so they don't discourage using these things. I mean, so if you have to like update certain elements and if you have to delete certain elements, you have to do that thing. So I think web application firewall mostly used when we expose services to outside. So for example, if you expose service to outside and you want to like accidental deletes, that is why they block these kind of thing. So when you design your API, you can pay extra attention. So for example, if you have like put, post, delete and get all these resources in the same API, probably you can control access by role. So or you can access by scopes. So for example, put and delete resources can be bind to a specific scope, delete write scope, and that particular scope can be bound to admin user, right? So then other users, even other users have access token. They cannot simply perform these operations because by the time we do the scope validation, that will fail because these people do not have permission. So if you are having that kind of security measurement, we don't have to worry about exposing put and delete to public through the web application firewall. So I don't see issue with exposing them as long as you have a right uh, security fine-grained security model to control the access.
Sounds about right. Next, Sanjeev, you were mentioning and explaining about using query parameters in your APIs, and apparently you mentioned that it is a slightly bad approach, and to avoid using query parameters. Could you explain this if possible?
Yeah, so actually, I did not want to tell query parameter is kind of a bad idea. So query parameters are we heavily using. So even if you look at the Facebook APIs or any other places, we use the query parameters heavily. So one thing I wanted to highlight is when you take the query parameter in and pass them to the implementation layer, we need to have some sort of validation, because in the query parameter itself, you can send the SQL injection kind of things. Because when you send the use ID, you can send put use ID colon delete all and something like that. So then when you build not for the stored procedure, so if you have built the SQL query and execute that against the database, then it can like delete certain things. So in order to prevent that kind of thing, it's good idea to validate the query parameters before we pass them into implementation. So we can check the length, and we can do the regex level validation. So that kind of validation we can do, data level validation we can do before passing. It's not a bad idea to use query parameters or path parameters. It's just you have to validate them before passing to implementation layer.
Understood. Okay, I think we have one final one. So, what are the top identity and access management solutions as of the current year, 2020, and which can be used in APIs? What are the commercial ones and open source ones?
Okay, so I think no, I'm not going to answer that question because someone can like tell I am biased or something like that. So
Exactly.
I'm obviously saying WSO2 is the best thing, right? So I don't answer that question. So they are like so when you want to do this kind of thing, you can like there are like independent vendors, like, and also Forrester and Gartner reports are available. Forrester report is kind of a good thing. So you can go to these sites and see their reports. So what they do is they usually annually or uh, I mean once per 2-3 years, they take all the competitors in this product landscape. It's a identity domain or the API domain or the integration domain. They take all of them and give them a questionnaire and the demo. So what these vendors do is they provide answer set to this questionnaire and they provide the demonstration. So based on that, individual set of individual panel evaluate all these products and list them. Who are the leaders? Who are the visionaries? Likewise, they categorize the product. So I think if you can look at something like that, then you can get the exact answer.
Yeah, so you can always do a little bit of personal research into
Yeah,
that.
personal research would be ideal. So if you are like too lazy to do personal research, then you can buy a report and see. But don't trust these report too much because sometimes they get biased and they are like different kind of thing. So best thing, like you Sabri mentioned, to personal research would be the best thing.
Okay, looks like I'm not getting any more questions as well. So I guess we can wrap up. Sanjeev, do you have anything to say before we wind up?
No, I think I covered almost everything that I wanted. So I would like to thank Slascom, Siraz, Sabri, and everyone for organizing this kind of webinar. So this is not just a one webinar. So we had like previous webinar and they are like coming webinars as well. So this is really good thing, and thank you very much for organizing all these things.
Okay, on that note, I think we can wind this up as well. So thanks a lot, Sanjeev. This is the second time I'm actually listening to one of your talks. As usual, it has been very informative. Learned something from it as well. So yes, and with regards to this session will be available on the Slashcom YouTube page. So please go ahead and have a look once it is up. It won't be up as soon as possible, but give us some time. We will get the relevant notification for that. That being said, thank you everyone. I hope you all learned something, and hope you have a fantastic evening.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.